Morning, everybody. Welcome to the first Baines Planning Committee of 2022. Happy New Year. My name is Councillor Sue Craig and I'm Chair of the committee. Please can I remind everybody to switch off or mute any electronic devices you have about your person. And can I also say the meeting is being filmed and the recording will be available on the Council's website. Anybody speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operators at the front of this room. And now I'll pass to the Democratic Services Officer to read the emergency evacuation procedure.
If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you use the main door and then the main exit of the building. If this exit is blocked, you turn left from the main door and leave the building by the south door on the side nearest to the Abbey. This is reached from the lobby at the bottom of the marble staircase. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. Please use the lifts. There are general public health principles that everyone should follow to help mitigate the risk of the spread of coronavirus, and these should be followed throughout your stay in the building. Maintain social distancing, clean hands regularly, avoid touching your face, and wear a face covering where necessary.
Thank you, Marie. And do we have any apologies for absence and substitutions?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And declarations of interest, do we have any to declare? No? I have no urgent business. So I'll pass to the Democratic Services Officer to inform you of the public speaking procedure.
Members of the public have registered to speak about individual planning applications on the agenda. Ward councillors not on the committee have also indicated that they wish to speak about applications. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. Objectors to an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Supporters of an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. If there is more than one objector or supporter of an application, they must share the 3 minutes allowed to each side. Ward councillors not on the committee who have indicated they wish to speak may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table in front of me. At the start, the light will be green and will turn to amber when there is 1 minute of speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks.
Thank you, Marie. And can I ask everybody to make sure when they're speaking close to their microphone as possible so everybody can hear clearly. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are these approved? Councillor Jackson?
I'll move that they're a correct record, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mppf, thank you. I'll sign those shortly. So we can move on to our first application of the day, which is the one that we put forward to a site visit at the last meeting, 18 St Catherine's Close, Bathwick, and I'll invite the case officer, Samantha Mason, to present her report. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this proposal relates to a house in Bathwick at 18 St Catherine's Close. The proposal was for the erection of a 2-storey side and rear extension and a single-storey rear extension following the demolition of existing structures. So this is the site location plan and aerial view. The site comprises a detached dwelling. This is the existing and proposed site plan. As with before, the existing plan is quite faint, but members will be aware from the site visit the single-storey elements here which are to be removed from the site, and the proposal is to be extended in this location here. So these are the existing floor plans. It's a little bit clearer here that the garage, garden room and workshop is single-storey, and that's the elements that will be removed. And then the proposed floor plans. The orange line marks the built form that's being removed, and you can see the extension is located here. Then we have the existing elevations. We've got the front, 2 side elevations, and the rear elevation. And then the proposed elevations. Again, the orange line is shown on the plans to mark the existing built form. So you can see on the front elevation, the 2-storey extension here along the side is shown here. And then at the rear, you can see how far it comes out along with the single-storey element. So this plan shows an assessment of distances to neighbouring properties from the proposed extension, all are over at least 20 metres in distance. Again, as with last time, it's relatively difficult to read, so if I just show you some examples, this green line indicated here, the distance is 24 metres, the one below it is 21 metres from the extension. To number 8 is 40 metres, to number 15 is 28.7 metres, and the distance to number 14 is 32.9 from the extension. So some photos. This is in the garden looking at the rear of number 18. This lower one is looking at the single-storey elements to be removed, number 17 in the background there. And then looking down the length of the rear garden and similarly down the length but at a slightly different angle. You can see the roof of number 15 just in the background. Then these photos are taken from the submission, and this is number 1, St Catherine's Close, which is opposite the site, across the road. This is the sort of gap that is between number 17 and number 18, so the proposed extension's going in this space here. This is lower down the road, so looking back up at number 18, and then you follow that view through down to looking towards number 19. And then members asked for a couple more photos of the street scene. So this is taken from St Catherine's Close. You can see the rear of number 17 here, and then down to number 18 here. And then this is St Anne's Way, and this is number 8 and number 6, and the gap between that you can just see in the mid-ground, number 18, and in the background, number 17. So the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of its character and appearance, integrating with the host dwelling and conservation area. It will not result in overdevelopment of the site, being of an acceptable scale. The proposal is not considered to result in adverse harm to residential amenity, given the distances and existing arrangements, and as such, the proposal is recommended for permission as set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. We have 3 speakers on this one. If I could invite the first speaker to come up to the front, please, which is Martin Shirley. Morning. You'd like to start whenever you're ready.
As before, As before, I am speaking on behalf of objectors from 7 neighbouring properties, 4 of which are represented here today. We would all like to thank the committee very much for visiting the site last week. We hope that this helped you appreciate why there is such strong and specific local feeling against this application. To repeat from last month's meeting, this application enters entirely new territory. The overriding difference between this application and any other in the locality is that it adds a large 2-storey rear wing to the property, unlike anything which has previously been permitted in this part of the conservation area. Every previous successful application, and there are many, has been a combination of roof conversion, side extension, single-storey rear extension. There is no valid justification for number 18 being different. As you will have seen, far from preserving or enhancing the conservation area, any 2-storey rear wing extension does the exact opposite, harming the open character of the area. And number 18 is probably the most unsuitable location in the close for a rear wing. Number 18's proposal, accentuated by the sloping topography, will cause a significant loss of residential amenity for neighbours. With its appallingly inconsiderate, huge blank flank wall and overbearing roof facing numbers 17 and 16, whose outlook and amenity will be seriously diminished, and the overlooking of number 19 below, whose loss of privacy will be significant and unacceptable. Number 17 have asked me to reiterate that the 72% increase in this second-storey roof plan area must correspond to a similar overall increase in the second story itself. And a significant proportion of that nearly 3/4 increase in second-story area is within the rear wing, hence its impact on the openness, outlook, overlooking and privacy. At the last meeting, it was explained that a key issue is whether extensions are judged to be acceptable overall in the context of planning policies. So, looking at those policies, this application clearly contravenes policy D3, urban fabric, which states that development must, quote, not compromise adjoining sites. And very specifically, under policy D6, amenity, this application equally clearly does not meet the criteria of, to quote again, avoiding harm to private amenity in terms of privacy and outlook/overlooking. This application, in its current form, does not respect the character of the conservation area and significantly harms the residential amenity of neighbours. We therefore ask you to please refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can have the second two speakers, please, which are Hugh Bunn and Councillor Amanda Rigby, to the front. Thanks. If you'd like to start when you're ready, Mr. Bunn.
Committee, thank you for the time to speak today and also for your site visit last week, which I hope gave a good context to the existing, somewhat dilapidated dwelling at number 18, the proposed scheme and the historic and current development within the vicinity. Rather than repeat the full presentation from the first committee, I'd like to focus on a couple of key concerns that were raised. And in fact, the case officer already covered the first point regarding the distance between number 18 and existing neighbouring properties. I'd like to add, in fact, that number 17, the distance between our property and number 17 increases by over a metre as a result of creating a side entrance. As a result, we propose that this proposal does not impact on neighbourhood amenity in any meaningful way, and certainly we're not creating any overlooking on neighbourhood properties. Number 17, as a matter of course, does have a balcony overlooking our property already, which we are not have any problem with at all. The size of development has been debated and has also just been mentioned. So I'd like to clarify the existing calculations based on approved government methodology, which takes into account the replacement of existing structures. The property has an existing volume area of 787 metres squared and a floor area of 170 metres cubed, and 170 metres squared. Post-development, the volume would rise by 38.5% and the floor area to 227 metres squared, representing a 33% increase only, which is not out of line with other approved developments in the area. The suggestion put forward in objection, using an alternative independent methodology, does not subtract the amount of existing dwelling replaced and therefore indicates a 77% increase on the existing structure. This would result in a dwelling of 300 square metres in floor area, which I'd suggest is incorrect. It's also of a scale of development well beyond our budget, just as a matter of fact. The type and style of structure has also been raised at the previous meeting and just now as being unique and setting a precedent in this area, but this likewise appears not to be the case. From quick searches, similar developments with similar double-storey rear or side extensions on two-storey houses can be found at Clarendon, Shamcastle Lane, 14 St Mary's Close, 38 Vello Lane, Applegarth, Shamcastle Lane, and a new build at 5 St Anne's Way. Far from creating a precedent, we suggest it is a far from unique design. We certainly aren't trying to get featured on grand designs. This has been achieved by responding appropriately to concerns raised throughout the planning process, either from the planning department or from consultation responses. In summary, we believe that the proposal is appropriate in size and scale, respects the amenity of neighbourhood properties, and will update a property in much need of modernisation to create a family home. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. When you're ready, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you very much, Chair, and can I thank the committee for going on a site visit. I hope they'll all agree with me that when it was said at the last meeting that this was on a small incline, actually walking up that hill, this is not a small incline, and I'm pleased you managed to see the topography for yourselves. I too am not going to repeat everything I said last time, but I think the points that I want to make were very well made as well by one of the previous residents. And I don't think we're as far apart as perhaps people might think we are. I understand the need, and those of you who managed to go on the site visit would have seen that a lot of the properties around there have in fact done extensions and are looking to do something that's of the size and scale that this application in front of you is asking for. The huge difference is where that expansion is actually happening. Every other application on this road has done an application of this size purely round the side return, and if there has been any expansion at the rear, it's been of single height story only, and people have then also gone up into the loft. I understand using some of the local other places as reference points, but the nature of Shamcastle Lane is that there are, certainly in Clarendon and the other properties that you mentioned, the nature of those are that they're very, very large detached properties with a lot of ground around them, which is not the nature, as you would have seen if you went, of St Catherine's Close. So the nature of my objection to this in its current state is the double height extension at the rear. It's a real shame that it wasn't possible to go and overlook from one of the neighbours' properties, despite the fact you wouldn't have had to go through the house and stand on the patio, because I think that would have given you some idea of the nature of both overlooking and being overlooked. So if this was stepped down, like every other extension has been in the road, I don't believe we would be here having this debate. So I do urge you, unfortunately, to reject what you've got currently in front of you and work with the applicants to come back with something that is more acceptable, more fitting, and that preserves and enhances the conservation area, as opposed to this, which I'm afraid doesn't. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. If you'd both like to come and sit behind me again. And we can move to questions to the officer. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I must say this is one of the applications we've had where a site visit has been absolutely invaluable. One thing that struck me with the adjacent property, which appears to have a two-storey extension, is that its roof is subservient to the main house. I wasn't able to pick out, I'm afraid, from the information we've got here, how the new extension roofscape would relate to the roofscape of the existing building, if that's possible to show that. I see, I just can't quite work it out.
Yep, okay, so this elevations are probably the best to show you. So the orange line that you can probably, hopefully, faintly just see here indicates the existing roof form. If I just go back to the existing plans, you can see. So on the front elevation, it follows the existing roof height, and then you can see from the side that it drops down as it comes out to the rear. So again, this is the other side. You can see here, you can see the sort of this gable element. And then that's the rear. So I hope that helps.
I was going to say, so in your view, this extension is subservient to the main building?
Yes, I agree with the officer wrote the report that the extension is acceptable. Members need to come to their own planning judgment.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor Hodge.
Hello, thank you for the presentation, Sam, and I appreciate there's a different officer that came to conclusions about this. application. I just want to ask a few more questions about the issue of an extension that is 2 stories and 2 dimensions to the side and to the back. And I really want to be clear on this point that has been touched on. So there are approximately 18 properties in St Catherine's Close, and we've recognised that probably around 7 or 8 have had extensions ranging from conservatories and a number with 2 stories to the side extension. I would just like, with single stories at the rear, I'd just like to be absolutely clear about whether any single property in St Catherine's Close has had permitted a 2-storey side and rear extension to those 2 dimensions. I'm aware that number 7 had put in an application in 2002 which was refused and refused at appeal, but I'm not aware that any have been permitted. The applicant has given us some examples on different roads. I think those are a different situation. I'd like to be clear in this close.
Yeah, I can't say with 100% certainty. I've obviously looked at some of the planning history around the application, but I haven't looked at all 18 dwellings history as far back as you know as it goes. So I think the answer really is to judge each case on its own merits. Thank you.
And I've just got a follow-up question. I just want to be clear again, because these are moderate size, I would say they're moderate size plots to the area, with some slightly smaller actually, and I want to ask a question of precedent and what we should think about that. So if this were permitted, 2 stories and 2 dimensions, would this set a precedent for future developments within the close?
I don't think it would. Again, each case is to be assessed on its own merits, so it would be, you know, in future, if any other applications came forward of this nature, whether that was acceptable in its location, it may or may not be for many planning reasons.
Okay. Any more questions? You have another one, Councillor Jackson?
No, I was going to make a proposal when you're ready.
Yeah, we haven't moved to the debate yet. Any more questions? You have another one, Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, so I just do have one more. I was just waiting to see if anyone else had one. I had one about the difference in terms of outlook and view. I just want to be clear in my own mind. So unfortunately, we realise we're not entitled to there's no protection of a view from a proposal. But the wording outlook is a change in outlook to look at the side of a building. Loss of a view isn't defendable, but a change in outlook looking at the side of a building, is that impact on amenity that we can take into consideration?
Yes, that could be a consideration if that outlook was you know, of a significantly overbearing nature to the neighbours that would harm their amenity. Yes.
Any more questions? No? So we'll move to the debate. Who would like to open the debate? Councillor Jackson.
I think this is one of the most difficult ones we've had for quite a long time, and I really appreciate the time and effort which has been put into coming to an appropriate conclusion. And as I said, the site visit is really important. And for me, what was important was standing at the back end of the garden, right at, you know, at the bottom of this orange oblong on our map, and looking all round. I think this is an exceptional site in that it has this length of garden, and I'm afraid I have to say that for an urban area, I don't think this is overdevelopment of the site. They are quite close to the centre of Bath. There is, what I was really quite impressed with was the urban design. Each house has got what I would call a perpendicular, like a church of the 15th century, ridge running round the windows, and I don't think that this extension is going to in any way impact on the overall urban design theme that runs in St Catherine's Close, which is very attractive, I must say. And I can appreciate why a family might want to extend their property rather than to move to a different area. It's unusual that it's on a well, it's not unusual for Bath that it's on a slope, and I'm glad we were able to measure the exact slope. This map here doesn't really indicate the extensions that are already on the neighbour's property. So I don't think it's out of place. I'm going to propose that policy D4 about the conservation area, enhancing and conserving conservation area, is not being broken. On the contrary, I think this will make, I have to say, I think the existing sunroom is pretty awful. I think it's actually going to improve the back view of the property, and the front view is not going to be disturbed. It's going to have a subservient roof, and so I move that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Davis? Anybody else for the debate? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I'd say, I think, having gone on the site visit and looked at the topography of this estate, I appreciate that a lot of properties have been developed within this road, but I don't think really that can have too much bearing on this because of the topography. I think each site has its own unique features, so we have to judge each site on its own unique features, not on whether the adjacent properties have had developments of any type. The property clearly needs renovating, and there's a lot to like within this plan, but I'm still very concerned about the two-storey elements in the rear extension. Without that, I think it's a very good design, a very good plan, but I'm still very concerned about that extension.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to comment? Councillor Hodge?
Yes, I'd just like to follow on from that. I looked at this is an aside that I think looking at the other extensions in the area in detail, there haven't been many objections at all actually to most of them, and this has created quite a bit of concern. But I'm slightly disappointed that the officer didn't work with the applicant to do what quite often happens, is to either step back the side extension or step down the rear extension so that it had less impact on the neighbours. And I would like to see the officer, well, I'd like to see the applicant come back with a design that considers those options.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge. Councillor Hansel.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, a very clear report and a clear presentation by the officer this morning. I agree with everything that Councillor Jackson said in proposing the motion. I think this is a planning gain. What we will see is better than what is there at present. We're not here to suggest, alternatives. We're here to judge whether the application is policy compliant, and I believe it is, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you very much. I think Duncan and Eleanor have got it absolutely spot on. This is a scheme where we've got large houses and there's a variety of extensions, a variety of styles, and what we've got here is a building with a very poor quality extension from a period in the past, and we've got a proposal to clear away what is clearly rubbish and replace it with something which enhances the building, enhances the view, and doesn't detract from the amenities of residents, in my view. I think the presentation by the officer showed that there was long sight lines all over the view, and I think this property can certainly take this size of extension. I think if you look at the whole estate, there's a brand new house gone in just round the corner in St Anne's, and so there's quite a few different styles of development going on, and I think this is completely acceptable, and I support the recommendation for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Would anybody else like to contribute to the debate before we move to a vote? No? Okay, so the motion we have on the table, which was proposed by Councillor Jackson and seconded by Councillor Davis, is to support the officer's recommendation. All those in favour?
That's 7 in favour, Chair,
And those against?
and 3 against.
Thank you very much. So we'll just give a moment for the officers to switch over. Okay, so our second application is Tiny House Pablo. If I could pass to the officer Isabel Down to do her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this application is for the erection of a detached dwelling following the demolition of an existing HMO. The property is Tiny House, which is located in Pablo. There is a verbal uptake for this application because it was not explicitly stated in the committee report. So committee members are reminded of paragraph 148 of the Mppf, which states, when considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the greenbelt. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. So here we have a site location plan and an aerial photograph of the site. So this is the site here, outlined in red, and this is the existing building. This is it here on the aerial photograph and the existing building here. Next to it, you've got a garage, and then these are other properties. This is outside of the housing development boundary and within the greenbelt. So the existing proposed site plans, the existing site plan here, you've got the dwelling house, the HMO as it exists. It's set within a large plot, as you can see. And then here, this is shown in a dotted line. So this is to be demolished. The dotted line is denoting that. You can't see the label. And you'll see that the proposed dwelling is moving within the site, the replacement dwelling, and is located within this portion. The existing elevations of the existing building, you can see it's made up of a variety of, sort of single-storey and two-storey elements. And then we've got the existing floor plans. So it is currently used as an HMO. It has a license for 6 people. This was shown on the application. And then we've got the elevations of the proposed dwelling. In terms of materials, the materials proposed is natural stone to the front elevation and then render to the side and rear with clay roof tiles. And then the proposed floor plans. So the property will have 6 bedrooms, which are located over the first and second floor. And then the ground floor has sort of the main sort of living area, kitchen, sitting room, dining room, etc. And then there is a bat roost proposed. So this is just a plan of the proposed bat roost, which our ecologist has considered to be acceptable. And then some site sections, which I think are quite useful to sort of just see the comparison of the 2 buildings. So this is the existing site section and the proposed. Obviously, this again is a dotted line because it's going to be demolished. So this is the proposed replacement dwelling. And then some site photos. So this is the existing HMO building. There's a couple of views of it there, face on and just slightly at the road. And just here you can see the existing garage next door. Just a couple of other photos to show the adjacent land. So this is still the plot. And again, just a bit of a better view, which shows the garage next door. And then this is the proposed accessway and into the site. So you can see it's moved further up the road towards the residential properties. And then this is the plot, so you can just see here the edge of the existing building, then the garage. And then this view is just the road and the sort of hedging screening and the bus stop that's located near to the site. So the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons discussed within the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Isabel. We have one speaker. If Oliver Keats could come to the front, please. When you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Oliver Keats, and I act on behalf of the applicants. We've been in discussions with the officers over a period of several months over the application and have made notable changes to address their concerns. For instance, we have removed the detached garage and home office and reduced the roof height to reduce the overall bulk and massing of the development. The application has support from both parish councils and there are no objections from the public. Additionally, both highways and ecology support this application, subject to suitable conditions. This is a proposal to replace an existing HMO with a detached dwelling of a similar scale and massing. This existing building is, to be frank, not particularly attractive and is of little architectural merit. This proposal represents a significant improvement aesthetically to the site. This replacement building is acceptable in principle and complies with the relevant Greenbelt policy, being in the same use and not materially larger than the building being replaced. What constitutes materially larger is not defined in either the Mppf or placemaking plan. Therefore, there is some degree of subjectivity. The existing building is 1,116 square metres and the replacement 1,287 square metres, representing an increase of 171 square metres or just 15%. In my view, this does not represent a material increase. Furthermore, the replacement dwelling will be located to the northern end of the site, a part which is far closer to the existing ribbon of residential development along this part of Hursley Hill. This clusters it with the existing built form. To quote from the officer's report, given its position set back from the road, it is not considered that it would appear overly dominant within the street scene. I agree with this statement. This building would only be visible from this road. A condition would be attached to any planning approval to ensure the removal of the existing building. In conclusion, a 15% increase is small and not materially larger in my view. The new dwelling is far more attractive and appropriate and set back from the road and therefore not overly dominant. For these reasons, it is my view that this application fully accords with the relevant Greenbelt policy contained in the Mppf as well as policies GB2 and CP8, and respectfully should be granted planning permission today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to come back and sit behind me. Do we have any questions for the officer? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crossley. I'll go first. This is actually one for the legal officer. Because I note, Chair, that the reason why this has come to committee is partly because of the lack of definition in the NPPF regarding what is materially larger. And I was wondering if there is no set amount in the NPPF, whether we should bear in mind the legislation in 1948 about the Green Belt, and that any sort of altered building should not have more than a third of the volume of the original existing building allowed. So So should we be thinking of the earlier legislation if there is no specific definition in the MPPF?
Yes, if you'd like to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. My advice in relation to that is that the approach that should be followed is to, it's a planning judgment in relation to the National Planning Policy Framework. So the earlier legislation, I wouldn't say is particularly, if at all, relevant. But it's an exercise of a planning judgment, essentially, as to what a materially larger building is.
So therefore, we should disregard this question of the calculations of a 19% increase and be thinking about whether the fact that, well, we don't know actually, do we, or do we, if this is going to continue to be an HMO, the fact that a HMO is being converted to a family residence or some other material benefit or whatever, is that the way in which we should be thinking? Are there exceptional circumstances or material benefits that would outweigh any damage to the greenbelt? Although I'm actually rather questioning whether there would be any.
Who's best to answer that? The officer? Or?
I'm happy to try and answer that one. So I think the first matter that does need to be considered is whether or not the building is materially larger. Obviously, I've come to the judgment that it is. I think there is no defined definition of what materially larger is, but it's generally based on a spatial impact. So, you know, if there's a volume increase, a footprint increase, increase in height, bulk, massing, etc., but also a visual impact. So visually in the greenbelt, would it appear materially larger than the building it replaces? You know, if the committee decided that it wasn't materially larger, then, you know, you would be coming to the judgment that it would be complying with exception D of paragraph 149 of the MPPF. If the committee were going to come to the judgment that actually it was a materially larger dwelling, then yes, in order to permit it, very special circumstances would need to apply. And these would, you know, have to give substantial weight to the harm to the greenbelt, so these would have to outweigh that harm.
Another question.
Yeah, carry on.
I wondered if the highways officer could clarify this issue. I gather there have been revisions to make it compliant. Exactly how it is compliant, because it struck me there was a great big hedge in the way.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Yeah, so there's amendments been made to the access, so it now complies with Manual for Streets visibility displays. So yes, it is compliant. They've made it so. I assume that the plans have included some trimming. If you give me a moment, I'll go into the plans and double check for you.
Okay, should we take another question while you're doing that? Yeah, Councillor Crossley.
Yes, thank you very much. Eleanor Jackson asked the questions I was going to ask about sizing. I've got one further question. If the committee were to reach a conclusion that this was acceptable, it's only acceptable if the other building is demolished. And I noticed on page 50 at the top, demolition, if approval were being considered, a condition of legal agreement securing the demolition prior to commencement of work would need to be secured. If we set that as a planning commission, is that something that's legally enforceable, i.e. they can't start the work until the other building is demolished, or is that something that gets circumnavigated at a later stage? Because to me that would be a key point in my consideration.
Yeah, I can probably answer that one. So I have discussed this with Chris Gom, and we think that a condition would be sufficient. This would likely be a pre-commencement condition, although obviously one has not been drafted at this time because it's been recommended for refusal. If, for example, a pre-commencement condition was recommended and works commenced on the site that weren't to do with the demolition, you know, this would be a matter for enforcement, and we do believe it would be enforceable.
Okay, Councillor Crossley. Councillor Hounsell.
Right. My question goes back to what I think is the key point about whether this is materially larger or not. Has there been any, I know we look at each planning application individually, but have there been any cases locally or nationally where an inspector, for example, has ruled on a similar situation for another application. You know, is there any case law that we can use to guide us on whether the 19% is acceptable or not?
Thank you. I don't have any specific examples with me today. I have spoken to other officers and had a look at some other appeal decisions. And I think in Baines, generally, you know, there are examples where we have taken increases in scale of sort of around 10%. You know, obviously the committee have to make that judgment. There's no set in stone figure. As I say, it's not purely a volumetric exercise. It is also, you know, the visual aspect in those regards. So there is, you know, there are many examples of appeal decisions in case law, but I think really it is a case-by-case assessment because there's not that specific definition. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Chris, but I think that covers that one.
Thank you, Chair. Very little to add to that, really. There is obviously lots of case law regarding replacement dwellings and replacement buildings in the Greenbelt, but really that case law comes back to, as the agent said, actually, that it is a subjective assessment of whether the replacement building is materially larger or not, and the case law supports that. It doesn't give any useful definition, any sort of useful information that we can use other than saying that it's a matter of visual and spatial considerations when assessing whether a building is materially larger or not.
Thank you. That okay? Councillor Hodge.
Yes. Thank you as well. I thought it was a very good report. I wondered if you could put again the slide up again for the visual impact of the existing against the proposed. I think you had one where the elevations.
That one?
Yes. Perfect. So could you just set out again? I think it's the three reasons that you came to the conclusion that that the new building will be materially bigger. I think it was on three aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have my report in front of me, so apologies if I miss anything. But I think my judgment really comes down to sort of a number of aspects. So. Obviously, there is the volume increase in the first instance. I think as well, you know, my view is that the existing property is made up of quite a lot of elements of single-storey as well as two-storey. You know, although it appears wider in total, you know, this dwelling is kind of two-storey built form all the way along at the frontage. And if you go to the existing elevations of the property, you can see those single-storey elements a bit more clearly against the proposed, which is largely two-storey, you know, with quite a high roof to accommodate a storey in the roof. I have noted in my report that obviously the property is moving towards the ribbon of residential development, but in my view, this alone sort of doesn't outweigh the increase in volume and the visual impact of the new building. I think it's also important to note, as you can see in some of the site photos, that, you know, it is still next to, in its current position, next to other sort of built form, albeit a garage and not residential. So that, you know, that's the conclusion that I've come to. Obviously, it's for the committee to decide whether or not they agree with that or if they want to come to a different conclusion.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Thank you very much.
Okay, highways, do we have an answer?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so going back through the officers' comments and looking at the plans, Councillor Jackson, it appears that there were a number of concerns originally, so not just relating to visibility. It was regarding the setback of the gate to make sure that they could fully pull off of the highway and not interrupt flow. It would appear that there was some vegetation in the verge, some sort of self-seeded saplings, hedgerow overgrown, so it's trimming all that back and reinstating the verge to a verge, keeping the hedge trimmed, and that's what will give them the suitable visibility.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, does that answer your question?
Yes, but needless to say, I've thought of another one.
Oh, can I take one from Councillor?
Going back to the NPPF, there is a principle in favour of development, is there not, which we have referenced before, and so I was wondering if that applied here. Secondly, I can think of two applications we've seen in the more recently before the committee, but the difference was that it was extending a building, a White Louse building, which was going to be conserved. And this, of course, is a complete flat demolition. Now, of the ancient conservation buildings, we did refuse one of them and we lost on appeal. They were both in the Coombe Hay area. So I think this is right. This is a new one for us, a total demolition and change of site. It's not being built on the same footprint. But anyway, if we could just clarify the question of, in favour of development. Whether we should mind that clause or whether it's not appropriate here anyway, because it's only one house.
Do you want to take that one, Simon, or do you want me to answer it? Or Chris?
I can take that one. There is a presumption in favour of sustainable development in the Mppf, and that's sort of the sort of overarching theme that runs through national planning policy. That's, as I say, that's the overarching theme, but then the detailed policies set out how that's put into place. Excuse me, and the detailed policies in this particular case, those of most relevance are those that relate to the Greenbelt, and obviously they say that the replacement of a building, the provision of a replacement building is not inappropriate in the Greenbelt, provided the building's in the same use and not materially larger. So I don't think the sort of overarching principle of presumption in favour of sustainable development is particularly relevant in this particular case.
Thank you. Is that a follow-on, Councillor Jackson?
Really for the officer, there isn't actually any reason why this building should be replaced, is there? It hasn't got a wonky roof or cracked foundations or anything, and actually I think it looks quite nice. I mean, it just mightn't be aesthetically pleasing to some people, but there's no structural reason or problem or anything.
I'm not aware from memory of the case that there's any sort of structural, there's no structural report as far as I'm aware that has been submitted to suggest that it's, in need of demolition for safety reasons.
Okay, Councillor Hughes has been patiently waiting.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. So, obviously, from looking at the plans then, so the existing building is going to be removed, but there's no plan to develop that particular plot. The plans seem to show the existing plot being split into two separate plots. So, do you know if that's the case, if this plot is going to be separated into two separate plots? And if so, are we open to a further application on the existing site for an infill development after this one is complete?
Thank you. So yes, I mean, this is all one plot at the moment, and obviously there is a fence in the proposed scheme, but it's not, proposed to split the plots in terms of having them in separate ownership. I have actually in the report detailed that if the committee was to overturn this and we were going to recommend approval, that a landscaping condition was included for the remainder of the plot, because obviously once you've demolished the property, you don't want it to be left, as a bit of a mess. So that is my recommendation, that if the committee were going to overturn this, that we would, recommend a landscaping condition for the rest of the site. Obviously if another application was going to come in further down the line for a new dwelling, infill dwelling, that is a possibility, but I can't comment on whether or not that's the applicant's intentions. If that was the case, then obviously that application would be assessed on its own merits when it came forward.
Okay, so and so currently there's nothing in here for the development of the existing plot other than removal of the building?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions before we move to the debate? No? Okay, who would like to open the debate? Councillor Hounslow.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I'm not going to propose any motion at the moment because I want to hear what other people think, but I just want to make the point about policy in Greenbelt, that policies in Greenbelt are quite strong and they're very helpful. I think it would be very dangerous for us to weaken Greenbelt policy that we might want to apply in other cases as well as this one. The question about whether this is materially larger, it's not simply a volumetric calculation, it's about the look as well, and I note how high the roof is for this. I'm also thinking that if you ask the person in the street, let's round it to 20%, would increasing the size by a fifth be considered materially larger? My gut feeling is that the ordinary person in the street would say yes. So at the moment, I'm minded to accept the officer recommendation to refuse, but I will listen to the arguments put forward by other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more contributions to the debate, please? Councillor Jackson.
I don't know if this is reasonable or not, which is why I'm asking the question. I noticed there's a bus stop there, and rural bus stops are a right problem because if you miss the bus, you can be waiting for hours for the next one. Would it be reasonable, as part of the Section 106, if we are to approve them, and it is quite a big if, to require an upgrading of that bus stop, which would, of course, mean taking a bit of the applicant's land, I think?
My sort of personal and professional opinion would be that it probably wouldn't be reasonable to request that in this case, given the relatively minor scale of the development, in that it's just sort of one dwelling. I can't think of many other examples where we would expect a contribution to a bus stop, which isn't necessarily essential to the approving of this development. I don't know, Chris, if you've got a different view on that.
Nothing to add to that, Chair. No, I agree with what the case officer has said.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark. I beg your pardon.
Yes, I've gone through a rapid change. Let's not go there. Based on listening to the officer's recommendation with regard to the green belt, I can't see on any grounds that we could go against what the officers recommended. I haven't heard anything that would substantiate a reason for going against the officer's recommendation. I'm in support of what the officers said, particularly with regard to the protection of the green belt and the inappropriateness of this development.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Sorry about that. Councillor Hodge.
I'm not sure whether that's... I'd like to go forward and take the motion to accept the officer's recommendation. I feel the same way as Councillor Clark. I feel, and building what Councillor Hounslow said, we have to think about future developments. I think the officer has made a strong case that it is materially larger in terms of volume, the elements of the building and visual appearance. And I think there's no particular challenges to this site, which would mean it would be relatively straightforward for the applicant, if they wanted to reapply with a proposal that isn't materially bigger, to make some slight changes to the design and achieve what they want to achieve. So I think we should stick with this this interpretation of the green belt. There aren't any very special circumstances, and support the officer's recommendation.
So, sorry, Councillor Hodge, are you putting forward a motion to do that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Clark. Thank you. Anybody else want to contribute to the debate? Councillor Crossley.
Yes, I'd like to speak against the motion to refuse. I think this is quite an interesting development, and I think the picture you've got up there is the key one. From me, looking at that, there is not a substantial difference between the two shapes. I know one's got a single floor and the other one is completely two-floor, but the question to me is that if we were to permit that we need to make sure that the other one was rejected. So I don't quite see why we've got the motion to refuse. I disagree with the officer's recommendation here, but the council, we're debating refusal. It seems to me what we've got here is an argument. Is 15 or there's two two scopes for the increase in size. One is 15% and the other is 19%. And Councillor Hansel said, if you were to ask a person in the street, is 20% big, they would say yes. But of course, it all depends upon what that 20% is going on and how it's designed and laid out. And I would say, if you were to look at a picture of this before and after, people would say, no, they're pretty much the same. You know, other than the fact that the shape and outline is the major difference, not the volume. And it's also, what you've got with the proposal is you're keeping it separated from the other housing units in the village. So I think what we've got is a recommendation, at the moment we're debating, a recommendation to keep the status quo. And I think what that does is it leaves the building where it is, quite evidently, but it denies the opportunity for a modern building and one that's closer to the built form. And, you know, Eleanor Jackson asked, is there anything special about the building? There's nothing special about the building, so we're just replacing one with another. And I don't have a problem with replacing one with another, you know, even though we've been saying, you know, what does Greenbelt policy say? We're changing one house for another house. And that's the debate we've got here, not do we keep with this. So I will be voting against this recommendation to stay with the officer recommendation. And if that vote is won, then I'd like to move the counter recommendation afterwards. If the vote is lost, of course, you won't need to call me. The other way round.
I know what you mean. Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis, sorry if I missed your hand up.
That's okay. My thinking is similar to Councillor Crossley. And as you'll know, it's come through us to come to committee. And at the time, I thought, look long and hard at this. And I actually don't think it would be an adverse impact on the Greenbelt by moving it nearer to the Ribbon development, which I know the officers, when she spoke just now, is considered. I think it wouldn't have an adverse impact because I think it was nearer to the residential development that's in that area, the small amount of residential development. It's further away from the garage or the industrial bit. It will leave a clear area between the two, which I think is important. I think we could put the relevant conditions in so that the concerns we may have about them not demolishing it and the landscaping that have all been mentioned when the officers answer to questions. And I think the impact of the amount is subjective, and I don't think it is materially larger. So I actually don't feel that the recommendation we have now in front of us is the right one at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Jackson, did you have another contribution?
Oh, well, I just wanted to say that I really cannot see the justification for the demolition of a perfectly good building. We are, after all, in an era of climate emergency. Some parties wear their green credentials rather prominently, but I think we all care about the environment, and the fact this house is going to be demolished and presumably leaving a hard standing area which you couldn't immediately convert to agricultural use or whatever doesn't have justification in any specific benefit. And I think it is terribly, terribly marginal whether this is a material enlargement or not. But I think on the whole it is a material enlargement. And if they were to do it on the site of the existing property, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But as it is, I'm going to vote with the motion and support the officer.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Mppf.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that they're moving that property and they have a plan, and that plan probably involves the garage as well. However, we can't consider that at the moment. But to me, I look at the new property and it doesn't seem inappropriate in the land on which it is to be sited. It looks a perfectly reasonable size. And for me, if they're going to do this, obviously they're looking for a little bit of gain, and 15% doesn't seem
against it. So I shall vote against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Just for clarification, I think it's 19%, but yeah, fine. Councillor Hughes. Have I got it wrong again? Yes.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah, Hughes. No, I did say the right name. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I will be supporting the officers' recommendations for this, and I'm pleased to hear the officers saying that any revised submissions will consider the development of the existing plot that's going to be demolished and look at the landscaping. I think that area needs much more detail in the plan as to how that's going to be developed and how it's going to be landscaped. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what Councillor Jackson said, and I think she makes a very good point that you know, demolishing an existing building to build further down the plot, there isn't particularly, as far as I can see, a good justification for that. And also, you know, disregarding whether it looks sort of the percentage of the increase in size, the fact that it's a two-storey development all the way along, its impact on the green belt would be more significant. So I will be supporting the officer in refusing the application.
Thank you. Do we have any more contributions? Councillor Hodge.
Yes, just one more minor point that I meant to make, that Whitchurch Village Council felt that they could only support an application where there was no increase in size, so I wanted to mention that as well. Yeah.
Okay, any more contributions to the debate from anybody before we go to the vote? No? Okay, so the motion we have before us on the table is to support the officer's recommendation to refuse, proposed by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favour?
7 in favour.
And against?
And 2 against.
And abstentions?
Sorry, 3 against.
Oh, was it 3? So no abstentions. So that motion is carried. Support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Chair, can you just give me a minute, please? I
was just going to say we only have one more item on the agenda, but we have been going for an hour, so yes, we can take a 5-minute break. Okay, welcome back everyone. And the third item on the agenda is 61 Warminster Road. If I could invite the case officer Isabel down to present her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for a roof extension and other alterations to 61 Warminster Road, which is located in Barthampton. Got a site location plan here, so you can see the A36, the main Warminster Road, and the property is here. An aerial photograph from 2017. So this one here is the property. This is the extent of their boundaries. This is their garden. And then this is the front driveway and the A36 Warminster Road in front. The existing proposed block plans. So this is the existing on this side and the proposed on this side. It is just worth noting that this ramp and steps is as existing. It's not shown on the existing block plan. There's not the same level of detail at the front, unfortunately, but you will see it on the site photographs later in the presentation. So this is the existing floor plan. So at the moment the property is a bungalow, so all the living accommodation is on one level on the ground floor, and then you can see the roof plan as well. You can actually now see the ramp and the steps on the floor plan. And the existing elevation drawings as well. So you've got the front at the top and the rear, and then the 2 side elevations. And then these are the proposed floor plans. So obviously the roof extension will facilitate a second story being put on the property. And you've got a mix of sort of bedrooms and living accommodation on both floors. The ramp and steps to the front will be maintained. And then this is the proposed roof plan, so you can see there's sort of various extensions, dormers being added. This element here is a kind of balcony terrace area, and then this is a walkway which leads to the garden area. You'll see from the photos that the site has quite an interesting sort of topography to the rear. So the proposed elevations, the changes are quite significant. So the roof ridge is obviously being raised and altered, and the whole sort of building is being modernised. There will be, so this material here is timber, I think larch from memory cladding, and then you've kind of got a black cement cladding to the dormers, and then sort of cement slate roof tiles. Again here you can see the walkway, helpfully with a little person on it, leading to the garden. So you can see actually on the drawings, this is kind of a slope of grass. So this is the main patio area down here, and then the garden really steeply slopes upwards to level off slightly at the top. So some site photographs. This is just the existing bungalow. So you can see there's quite a large area here of parking to the front. Obviously you've got the ramp going up, which I spoke about, and the steps to the front door. And then the gardens. So these photos do sort of show it a bit better. So this is the existing patio area, and as you can see, it slopes really, really steeply up to the back boundary. So the walkway is proposed to sort of come out. I mean, this is approximate, obviously, because I don't have it superimposed on these drawings, but on these photos, but the walkway will sort of come out to basically join the garden slope. Just some other views of the neighbours. So this is sort of standing near the top of the slope, looking down towards the property. So you've got the bungalow next door, and then on the other side, you've got the neighbouring properties. You can see they've got sort of a roof terrace area here, and there's dormers you can sort of see all the way along. Just some more of the garden. So this is standing at the bottom, so you can kind of get a sense of the slope towards the rear. So again, this is the rear boundary. The walkway sort of coming out to join the sort of existing topography. And then some wider views. So this, again, is the front elevation of the property with the entranceway. And then I've got some images from Street View which show sort of the variety of buildings which are located along this part of Warminster Road. So this here is the application site. This is going up the road away from Bath. So as you can see, there's kind of a mix of two-storey dwellings and dormers, etc. A bit further along, there is a property, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, I'm afraid, but it is in the report. I think this was approved in 2016. So there is an example, you know, within the sort of immediate locality of a fairly modern dwelling. I think the application site is just down here. And then this is a view going down the road towards the city, just of some of the other properties. Again, sort of a mix of single-storey and two-storey dwellings. So the application is recommended for permission for the reasons discussed within the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Isabel. We have one speaker on this one, Steve Haler. If Steve Haler could come to the front, please. When you're ready.
Good afternoon. As I say, myself and my partner live at number 62, the bungalow immediately to the west side of the proposed development. We objected to the application partly because the proposed walkway that the case officer mentioned will overlook both our rear garden and also our bathroom window. Now, the committee report mentioned that when you can already get to that same height by walking to the top of that back garden slope. However, at that level, then your feet will be level with the bottom of a 6-foot fence, which provides plenty of screening. Whereas when that walkway nears the house, as at first floor level, then as the ground and the fence slopes away, then you will soon have your feet pretty much at the top of that fence. So for much of that walkway, you will have fairly unobscured views into our back garden and also into our bathroom window. We're concerned that slope, the impact of that slope might not have been fully taken into account when coming up with that recommendation. We also object because the first floor living accommodation, rear windows, balcony, and the walkway will also overlook the field behind the house, which is part of our land and essentially forms an extension to our garden. And after my hopefully imminent retirement, I will get to spend even more time than me and my partner already have out there, coming up with a sort of wildlife-friendly area with orchard, wildflower meadow, etc. The applicant did mention to me a few months ago that his family were looking forward to being able to overlook that land as a result of this development, but we feel this would be a further invasion of our privacy. I note that the committee report, whilst mentioning our other two objections, didn't have any detail in relating to that objection, and it's possible that with the unusual layout of the land with that extension to our garden wrapping round behind the garden of number 61, that might have been overlooked in coming up with the recommendation. Finally, we will also lose some light into our bathroom window as a result of the increased roof height. I note the committee report says that doesn't matter because the bathroom is not living accommodation, but we do still feel that would be at least some small loss of amenity for us, and that coupled with those two privacy issues that I've already mentioned, this may be significant enough for you to consider rejecting the plans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you'd like to come back behind me. Do we have any questions for the officer, please? Councillor Clark.
With regard to the walkway, I'm just reading here and haven't heard the comments the gentleman's just made. Do I understand that the provision of this 1.8 metre high screen will in fact allow the neighbouring residents privacy, i.e. it will not be overlooked and he will not have his neighbour gazing across, looking at the field across his garden?
Yeah, so the recommended conditions, sorry, I'll just go back to the that plan. So the recommended condition is for the screen to actually be placed on this elevation on the balcony element rather than the walkway. So actually the gentleman who just spoke lives at the property on this side, not the one on this side. So in that regard, no, there's no screen proposed on the walkway itself. You know, from my view on this is that the nature of a walkway is different to the balcony element. You know, the balcony element, I think, you know, you would expect somebody to sort of sit out on, stand out on, and therefore, you know, my view is that actually there will be, you know, opportunities to really sort of overlook this way. Whereas in terms of the walkway, it's quite narrow. It's you know, unlikely to be used for seating. You know, the movements along it will be more transient. That's kind of the judgment that I've come to in terms of the positioning of the screen, but obviously that's for the committee to decide.
Could I just?
Yeah.
Could we make that a condition, i.e. that there could be a screen erected next to the walkway? And do you think it would make a lot of difference? Presumably you don't, because you think it's going to be transient. But let's face it, people do tend to use all of their space.
Yeah, I think we could reasonably add that as a condition. I mean, yeah, as you say, my view is that it is transient. You know, I probably would have to have discussions with the applicant on that one, because it would sort of very much change the development if you know, you're going to put a 1.8 metre high screen all the way along a walkway. It's not shown on the plans as existing, but I think it probably could be secured by condition. Chris, I don't know if you possibly feel differently about that.
Okay. Can I just make a comment? But from what the gentleman said, it seemed to be that the screen would be more necessary towards the bottom of the garden, because as I was understanding it, maybe I got that wrong. So if there was a screen that side, it was towards the nearing of the house that he was most concerned with. That's as I was understanding it. So it wouldn't need to be all the way along the walkway.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's sort of reasonable to request. Obviously, the walkway, and again, this is very approximate because you know the lines of the building are sort of changing, but it would come out from here. So I'm assuming it's sort of this area nearer the house that is more of a concern. You know, as I say, that's not the view that I've taken, but if the committee wanted to come to that decision, that would be acceptable.
Chris, I think the question was, is that too large a change, a material change to have as a condition, if you like?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to confirm that I agree with what Izzy said. Yeah, if members are minded to grant permission, they could do so with an additional condition, securing the installation of a screen along that walkway, if committee are so minded.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor Hodge?
Yes, thank you as well. There's two questions really. It's difficult to, looking at the diagram and then looking at the pictures, to have some feel for how long that walkway is, because it doesn't look very long on the diagram, but it does look quite long in the pictures to reach the top of that platform from the middle point of the house. And also, I just wondered, was there any disability reasons for wanting the walkway rather than, how is that terrace normally accessed? Well, by the, there seem to be steps up previously.
Yeah, so I will just go back. To the existing proposed site plan, so you can therefore sort of see the walkway a bit more. What you've got is the walkway will obviously sort of be screened partially here by the inclusion of a dormer, and if you sort of compare it to the existing, it's kind of coming out from here, so it'd be screened in that location, and then obviously would stretch to the rear. You can see on here that, and this is the case as existing, this is what I walked up when I visited the site, there are steps which go up to the top of the slope, which is the only access to the lawn, you know, because there isn't this walkway. I don't know off the top of my head if there's any sort of specific disability reasons for that. I would have to go back and check the design and access statement to confirm. And I also don't have the measurements on me, I'm afraid, for this length. I'll just pop back to the photograph, just so you can see again. So sort of taking this as the approximate, it would be sort of coming out from here, obviously sort of screened by this bit, the new element, and then coming out to the ridge of the grass slope here. Sorry, I'm showing lots of diagrams. So again here, this is the proposed. Obviously you've got this kind of dormer extension on the back. The walkway will come out over the top of the terrace to the top of the slope. I hope that's helpful. I hope that hasn't confused the situation.
Can I just ask one more thing while you've got that picture up as well? So the line, is that an accurate fence line for the neighbours that goes,
as in
traverse that one there with
this
your
one?
pointer? Yes.
Yeah, so that is the fence line. I haven't got the measurements of that on me, but obviously it's assumed this drawing is to scale. I have measured other parts of this drawing, so that is the fence line.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any more questions? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. This was a slide I wanted to look at more carefully. I note that there is a condition about the officer having to give approval in writing to the materials, but I note that Barthampton Parish Council think that this scheme is contrary to policy D2 and will have an adverse impact on the street scene. And it's not really terribly clear to me how, if I've understood this picture properly, how it will fit in the street scene. I wondered if the officer could talk a bit more about the urban design context of this immediate vicinity.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jackson. So I'll revert back to some of my photographs, which I think are quite helpful, screenshots. So the character of along the Warminster Road, I don't know how well members know it, but it is mixed. There is a mix of material. There's examples of timber, recon bar stone, render, clay roof tiles, etc. There's also a real variety in terms of the form of surrounding developments. As you see, obviously you've got this pretty modern development. I think it's 3 or 4 doors down. I can't remember exactly. You also have styles which are more traditional, such as these here. So I think that there is a case to be made that a modern development would be acceptable. just sort of going back as well, obviously it would be raising the height. It's adding an additional story. I think next door, you know, you've got that next door. You've got an even higher property here. So there's a variety of heights, a variety of styles, architectural features, etc. So I think, you know, that's where I've come to the view that actually a modern dwelling here wouldn't harm the character of the area, because the character of that area is so mixed. But obviously, you know, it is an assessment that the committee would have to make. You know, the design, etc. There is a sort of subjectivity around that. So I would suggest that members might want to come to their own view on that one.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? We'll move to the debate then. Who would like to open the debate? Councillor Hounsell?
I'd like to propose a site visit.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Jackson.
Can I speak against that? Sorry, I really don't see need for a site visit. I think we've got all the information on hand to make a decision now, and so I should vote against a site visit.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Well, I really think that since the neighbour has made such a strong case about loss of amenity and the impact of this walkway on him, it would be really helpful to stand where that walkway is planned to be and to look at the dimensions. I'm afraid, unlike Councillor Crossley, I'm rather spatially challenged. So that's why I'm going to support this request for a site visit.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments about the site visit? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I think a site visit is a good idea. I mean, I think the neighbours made some very valid points, particularly looking at the design of this walkway, and I think I think we need to go and visit the site. I also think that the issues that are raised about the design fitting in this location needs to be looked at in more detail, because although the properties are quite varied in this road, they're all very, very traditional in their designs, and this one would be quite unusual in this street scene. So I think for both reasons, I think the site visit is necessary.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal on the table from Councillor Hounsell, seconded by Councillor Jackson, is to have a site visit. All those in favour?
Seven in favour.
And against?
2 against.
Abstentions?
1 abstention.
So that is carried. So we will take a site visit before the next meeting and discuss this one again then. Thank you. So those are all the applications for today. Item 9, the appeals report. Do members have any questions or comments on the appeals report? Otherwise, we're just asked to note that. And the date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 9th of February 2022, and we have a site visit on Monday, the 31st of January, if you could put that in your diaries. And I'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you all.